Hello everyone, this is Becca from Willow Hill Designs and welcome to my channel. Today I'm sharing the garden shed from Down the Garden Path, Roxy's Journal of Stitchery. And I'm sharing the progress that I have made on mine so far. And because this garden belongs to this little mouse on here, I decided to use a teacup. This little mouse lives in this discarded teapot, and I decided to use a discarded teacup as her garden shed. So, and I'm calling her Miss Lucy. So far, this is what we have. A little bird, her flowers along her stone wall, a little fairy, and some lily of the valley, and some wisteria on her garden gate, which is another path off of her main path, and who knows where that leads. But that looks like a pretty little area down there, her vegetable garden. And here's her garden shed, or I'm calling it a potting shed. And let's see. What I've done on this is I decided to make it a discarded teacup, which I'm just thinking now I should stitch some cracks in there to make it look like it's discarded. But I'll share the fabric that I used for this. And this is the same fabric that I made the teapot out of. And it's looks to me like a blue willow almost, so that's why I chose that. And for the inside of the teacup, I chose this, but I thought that that was a little too dark. I didn't want to go with white. I thought that might be too stark. So I used the wrong side of this fabric, and I chose one of the lighter areas for the inside of the teacup. And then the very bottom of the teacup, I used the darker fabric here, just to look, that little circle that's down at the very bottom of your teacup, hopefully showing some depth. And so on this teacup, I did, around the edges, I took a blue pencil, a Derwent pencil, and I just went around the edges here of the teacup and the saucer, just to sort of delineate that edge. I think it's looking a little brighter here on the camera than it is. It's paler. And I stitched it down with kind of a running stitch or a whip stitch, but rather than being at an angle, it's a straight perpendicular whip stitch. And I thought that that sort of added a little element of design on there, on the edges of the rim. That was really tricky to get this to look like a teacup on its edge. So I don't know. But inside the teacup, I made a bench, and I did a few flower pots, and all of the stitching and the flower pots and the flowers are done with one strand of embroidery floss. And anything more than that I think would have been too chunky, because this whole garden and everything that's in it and the little mouse is so tiny that you really need something smaller. I added a little spade here hanging on the wall, and a little pot here that's kind of on the lip of the cup. And there's some vines growing up around the pot. Let's see if I can get this. Sorry for shakiness. And also, and I I just couldn't stitch these letters on. It was just too tiny. So I used a Pigma pen on that and just wrote in potting shed. She's definitely marking that this is her shed. And I also added a little, some greenery hanging down from the overstory of growth. And these I will be invisible stitching down. I began to just do a little back stitch along the center vein of the leaves, but I'll also be adding some embroidery to the roses and maybe a little bit to the leaves on there. And the fabric that I used for those hanging greenery is this fabric, and just cut out some random pieces that I thought would be nice. I actually cut one of these leaves as a very pale one, kind of like that one. I'd like to just sort of stitch that down at some point. I think it's this one here. Just a very pale little leaf that maybe fell from the leaves above. I'd like to stitch that down, but I'm waiting to see what our other prompts are to leave room. And the flowers here came from this fabric, which I love. This rose I used. Thought that was so pretty. And I did use some fray check on some of these edges just because I didn't want things fraying out. And I'd love to put this swan somewhere in her little garden, like a little puddle or a little pool. But I'm trying to conserve space because I don't know, I don't think I'm going to fit all the prompts on my 36-inch roll. But I love that. Just the idea of that little swan in there, I think sounds so pretty. And I also added a little wheelbarrow for her. Oh, let me put it on this so I can stabilize it a bit better. I added a wheelbarrow, and that is done also with one strand of embroidery floss. And I will be adding some vegetables or greenery to the wheelbarrow, and I added a garden rake on there as well. And this little wheel, this wheelbarrow is so small that to add a little tiny button, it was just too clunky. I actually had a Heshy bead on there, the little bead with the hole in the center, and it was just a little too chunky. So I cut a piece of wool, kind of a persimmon or a terracotta color, and I stitched that on with 50 weight cotton that you would use in your sewing machine, 50 weight thread. Embroidery floss was a little too chunky for that as well. So that is my little, ooh, sorry about that. That is my little garden shed or potting shed for Miss Lucy. And I'm really anxious to see what the next prompt will be. And this is all I have left of my roll of the 36 inches, which is really not a lot. Oop. There's really not much left here. So I'm hoping that I can fit everything in, but I'm thinking I'll probably have to add to this roll. So, and I'm just thinking also, this little background here that I'm working on is, it's a little piece of a quilt. It's a wedding ring quilt. And it was two pieces, probably a cutter quilt that someone was selling, and I just stitched the two pieces together with some lace. and I'm adding some doilies to it, and this will go on here somewhere, and some of this lace, some of it is stitched down and some not. This lace is from when my niece got married. My daughters were in the wedding, and a jacket was made for them to go over their gown, a little short jacket out of that lace. And I had purchased it and gave it to the woman that was making the jackets, and I said to her, you know, I would like anything that you have left over. And she said, oh, definitely, no problem. So I have lots of that lace, and I'll be adding it to this little background here, another little slow stitch piece. Also, a subscriber had asked me how I store my embroidery floss, and I don't know that I can show it here. This is a drawer from a vintage DMC cabinet, and I store my floss on these stitch bows. I love to use these. These are so easy, and you just slip your floss right off of the, take the little papers off the ends and slip it onto these stitch bows, and it stays so nicely. And this little drawer originally had, I still have the plastic dividers that separated the floss, and they were just too small for these stitch bows. So I just made some dividers out of foam core to put in here, just to insert. It just sits in here. And this is how I store my floss, and I love it. I store it by color family, which makes it so easy. And I think I may know how to add pictures. As a novice videographer, very novice, I will try to add some photos of that little cabinet and the drawers to show you. But it's a nice way to store your embroidery floss. So I'll just give you one more close-up before I say goodbye of my little Miss Lucy's potting shed. And her vegetable garden. And I've decided that that's not Peter Rabbit's coat. That's a little mouse's coat, because it's much too tiny for Peter Rabbit. And her little secret garden gate that leads off of her main path that she scampers along. And her little bowl of, little basin of veggies. I added those pears and radishes in there, and I love the way it looks. Makes me think of, maybe she's a little French mouse. A little French mouse's garden. Some flowers and her lily of the valley. And a little fairy. You could really just get lost in here, I think. Well, I could anyway. It's a snowy day here, and I would love to be stitching, but I have work I have to do. It's Saturday and cleaning day, so I better get back to that. But anyway, thank you very much for joining me today on my journey down the garden path. Thank you for all of the very kind and sweet comments that I have received up to now. I'm really appreciative. They really touch me, because I guess you don't think of your stitching as anything out of the ordinary, but people have been so very sweet. Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.